Let's first add custom HTTP status codes. As we saw that when the user wasn't existing, it showed the right error but still not the right response code. So let's import response and status from FastAPI. Let's add the response to be tweaked. We'll add a default status code of 200, and in the error state we'll tweak it with the HTTP 500 for now, because we are not doing more custom checks. We'll do the same to the other routes. Similar pattern, status code 200 as default, and the 500 internal error in error cases. Let's check it out again. For a non-existent user, as we see, we get a 500 internal server error, so this is working. Now let's add support for env config variables. So we'll create a config.py in our lib directory that we have and expose it via settings. So let's create the config.py. We'll start by creating a class settings, which will be importing base settings from pedantic settings. We'll install it later. We'll have SQLite DB path. Let's also include DB AutoCommit and DB AutoFlush settings here. And if an env file is provided using env variable itself, it will superimpose the values here using the env variables part of that env file. So we expose settings. Now let's import pedantic settings, base settings, and the settings config that we are using here. We'll import OS to get the path of the env file exposed via env variable. Let's name it chatter env file for now, and we'll set the SQLite DB path only and use the DB AutoCommit and DB AutoFlush default values. Let's do one thing. So we'll change the hard-coded values to the settings values. Have test.db as the default value and dev.db as the env superimposed value, so we'll be able to test that as well. Let's change the AutoCommit and AutoFlush hard-coded values from the settings. Now let's test this out. First install pedantic-settings, since we haven't installed FastAPI all. Now let's test. Okay, so the default values are working fine from the test DB. Now we'll see if the superimposed value of env, that is dev.db, works. So this should actually create a new DB by itself if it picks up values from the env file. So we'll make a DB call here that should instantiate it. As we see, before it was just test DB, now we have dev.db listing as well, so that works out. Now we'll add few users and see if the users are occurring in there. Let's change the table name to lowercase. We'll add AutoIncrement for ID, as we didn't have that before. Let's remove the older DB. We'll add the users again in a fresh state. We won't be passing ID for now as it's in AutoIncrement mode. Let's add a couple of users more. Let's see how many users we got. We have the fresh users only. Let's see if we have a proper ID value for the last user we added. Seems right, 3. Let's just do a SQLite 3. Cool. So we have the users table, we have the required records. More in the next video.